Hey everybody, so we're going way back here to June before I got my gimbal. So apologies right off the bat for the shaky cam here. There's also going to be a whole lot of still imagery in this video to try and break that up. This hike log is going to look at Browns Creek Falls. This is it's a moderate hike. There are places where it's an easy hike, an easy moderate, a moderate, and a few places where it's a little bit more challenging of a moderate. It's a 7-mile round trip, and I did this with a 4x5 camera as well as a video rig. So it didn't have to be as hard as I made it. I made it way more challenging than it needed to be. This is in an area in Colorado that's in southern central Colorado, up in the mountains near, I think the town is nearest is Nathrop, is what the All Trails said, and that area is in the vicinity of Buena Vista and St. Elmo, and that general area south of Leadville. So the scenery is pretty typical of that area, where there are some really dramatic mountains, really lovely wildflowers, and some stunning, absolutely stunning alpine forests. I don't have the elevation written down here. It never gets above tree line, so it's probably in the 9,000 to 10,000 foot range for the hike from start to finish. And there you can see me carrying the big old 4x5 camera exactly the way that Manfrotto says don't carry cameras with this tripod, which is to say clipped into them and over your shoulder. It's a huge no-no. So do as I say, not as I do in this instance. So here are some of the mountain ranges along the trail. Most of the trail is fairly well shaded, and then it'll break into areas like this where there are just generally really nice views of the forest around and also the mountain ranges. And this is one of the really nice things about hiking in forests, is that you can have lots of areas where it's shaded, and then you'll get an occasional break to look at the mountains. Not a big fan of photographing forests. I find it needlessly complicated. It's really hard when you're right in front of a tree to take a good photo of it, unless it's a really tiny tree, simply because if you have a lens wide enough to do that, it's going to distort the dickens out of the tree and make it look unnatural. So for me, hiking through forests like this is really a wonderful thing to do. Photographing in them is always a challenge. So I find myself photographing these small things, little areas of ephemeral streams, or like this, little areas of cascades or waterfalls where the water flow isn't much, maybe an order of a couple gallons a minute. So, and then you get these little openings where you can photograph a few trees, but they're not generally super dramatic. This one's kind of nice. This was a very nice meadow. And, in the background there, you can see that mountain under those clouds. I believe that's Mount Antero, for those of you who are familiar with the mountains out here and are trying to get your position. There were also, in June, tons and tons of butterflies. That was a tiger swallowtail butterfly, if I remember correctly, the yellow and black one. And they were all over when I was out on this hike. Now, being June, it was kind of hard to predict the weather, and it ended up being pretty warm. If I recall, it was in the upper 80s on this hike. So even in the shade, where it was in the mid 70s, mid to upper 70s, it was cooler. It was still pretty darn toasty. So if you are going to be hiking at elevation, you need a lot of water. And if it's going to be hot, you need even more. I ended up going through almost a gallon on the hike. And then whenever I go on a hike, I have a 32 ounce and a 40 ounce that I keep in the car. Really strenuous hikes like the Decalibron, I'll take the 32 ounce with me as well. But on the way home, I ended up drinking 72 ounces more of water just to rehydrate after this hike. So here we are. Browns Lake is beyond the creek. Beyond the falls rather. So we're not going to go that far on this hike. We're just going to go up to the falls, which are impressive. The falls were absolutely stunning to witness and photograph. This portion of the trail that you're seeing here, where this little creek crossing is and that we're shaky cam walking along, also is on the Colorado Trail. So it's pretty heavily trafficked. And in just a few seconds, we're going to come up here and I'm going to let you hear some of the sounds of the forest as I hiked. Actually, I think of one of the cascades. And this is just audio taken with the Sony A7S II, just to give you a sense of what it sounds like at one of these little ephemeral streams. Getting closer to the waterfalls, there's this sign-in booth. There was nothing to sign in with, but if you're ever out hiking and they have paperwork out to sign in with, it's a safety feature and also an idea of how many people are in using the forest. So basically, let's say you were out hiking or camping, doing an overnight backpack, especially on the Colorado Trail. That's a very popular thing to do. And there were a wildfire. It would be possible for the rescuers to go to one of those books and see how many people are in the forest that they need to rescue. If the book says there are 22 people in the forest, they're going to go in there looking for that many people. If you didn't sign the book and you have just you or you and a friend, whatever it is, they're not going to be looking for you. And they're not going to be counting you if they are able to rescue everybody else. So it's also a good way for the Forest Service or whomever's managing these to get a sense of how much use these trails are getting, and that helps to prioritize the trails for care and maintenance and so forth, as I understand it. So when there are books out to sign into trails with, sign in and out. Please do, and definitely help forest managers rescue you in an emergency and keep track of how popular our wilderness spaces are. So at any rate, the trail continues, and as you can see here, it's really flat, really well defined. The majority of the trail was like this, and it was just very easy to follow where I needed to go, and just a nice experience to walk along it. And as you can see, there's a nice mix of aspen trees and pine trees. So I got to imagine that in the autumn, this would be a simply spectacular hike to take to look at the fall colors in this area up close. And here we are coming along up into this meadow we saw a photo of earlier with Mount Antero in the background. At least I'm pretty sure I think it's got the right profile to be Antero. It certainly looks like it. So there's the Ghibellini 4x5 Proxima setup, taking photos of random people. This was a very enjoyable and fun group of people I ran into on the hike a couple of times. Tons of fun. And so the photos that you're seeing in here right now have so far mostly been digital. The black and white photos have been taken with the Ghibellini. We're going to get into some more of the 4x5 images in a bit. And that group photo was one of them. It was taken on E100 with a Kaltar 2 165, but the rest of these have been with the Yashica 45 on my Sony A7S II. And now this is a little bit more of what the river sounds like. And that river is present on and off throughout this hike. And it gets bigger, of course, as you get closer to the waterfall. And here we are getting fairly close to the waterfalls. And I will shut up here in just a second and let you listen again to the sound of the water increasing as we approach the waterfalls. We'll wrap up this video with a bunch of stills because it wasn't a hike I loved, but it was a destination that I really loved. The waterfall, the Browns Creek Waterfall, is phenomenally beautiful. Has a very high flow rate, so the photos were really easy to take and have them turn out well because it was really easy to get dramatic water blur. Most of these photos were taken on the A7S II. There are some in here that were taken on the Ghibellini. I can't remember which. I think the 4x5 aspect ratio ones were taken on the Ghibellini, and these longer, skinnier ones were taken on the A7S II. At any rate, it's a fairly easy waterfall to reach in the stakes. It's a 3.6 miles each way and a not hard hike. And the photo opportunities here are easy. It's very simple to take wonderful photos of this waterfall. And this was definitely taken on the Ghibellini, by the way, with the Schneider-made Kaltar 2 210mm. That is a digital that's taken with the A7S II again. And at any rate, if you time your hike to get here about lunchtime, there were tons and tons of people here at lunch just hanging out, eating sandwiches, putting their feet in the water at the base of the falls, where not in the falls, but in the little ponds and pools at the bottom of the falls. The water flow here is not survivable if you fall in. These golden glows on a couple of these photos are because of a problem with the lens board with one of my lenses in the Ghibellini. The black and white shots here are, that one's direct positive paper, and so the direct positive paper worked out really well for blurring the motion, but it also blew out the highlights really quickly because it was a fairly high contrast scene. And we'll wrap up here with a few last photos from along the way. This next one was taken on a plate, on a J-lane plate. No, that's direct positive paper as well. I take that back. Of a little tree growing alongside of the path. And this is on the way back home. I stopped at Kenosha Pass to look at the mountains there. So it was a wonderful hike. I hope you get a chance to do it if you are in the area. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next hike log.